Okay, talking here with Chuck Ballingall, Hall of Famer, and he's going to share with us a little bit first about his younger days and where he went to school and all that good stuff.
My younger days, well, I competed for Fountain Valley High School.
Where's that, Chuck?
Orange County.
Okay.
Had a terrific coach, Jim Caforio.
I remember Jim.
We were, in fact, kind of coincidentally, although I think really in some ways things are all tied together, the year before my freshman year in high school, Jim was the coach at Damien. And he came over from Damien to Fountain Valley, and he and I got there at the same time, the fall of 1974. He was my coach the entire time. He inherited a pretty active program from a woman named Sharon Swickard. And I debated and did speech for Fountain Valley for 4 years, mainly extemp and impromptu were my two main.
Not debate.
Well, no.
Debate.
Yeah, policy debate, which at that time was the only debate.
Right.
Debate, extemp, impromptu. A tournament of HI, a tournament of oratory. Optimist Club, that kind of thing. And then after Fountain Valley, I went to the University of Redlands and debated for the University of Redlands.
And going back to those years, I guess, if you say before LD, in the 70s,
right?
How was debate different then, and what do you think of the change?
Well, I came to debate after there was a spread debate circuit. So there were certainly debaters, and I was one of them, who did what would have been thought of as fast debate for that time, although nowhere near as fast as today, as my kids constantly remind me. But then again, we went to a lot of tournaments, and in fact, I don't think we went to many tournaments, if any, maybe very few, that were all spread tournaments. So anything we went to, we pretty much had to be ready to adapt, whether we're at Fullerton or whether we're at La Mirada or Tustin, some of the big invitationals at that time. There were a lot more coaches who were judging in those days, so you really had to be prepared for a coach judge or a college judge. We didn't go to so many tournaments where there were parent judges, even then, but there were a few, and so we had to be ready for that as well. So I think there was certainly a lot more emphasis placed on on adaptation, which I think is a good thing. I think that speaking skill is very important. The ability to do that is a big part of what we should be doing. And yeah, I think that was probably one of the biggest differences. The other big difference, just in terms of how debate was different in the 70s from now, is, of course, in the 70s, you could go to any number of California tournaments, have a very large number of California teams present, have excellent competition, and never really have to go out of the state to get good competition.
Can't do that now.
Which is very different today, unfortunately. And I graduated in June of 1978, and Proposition 13 passed in June of 1978, and I don't know if it was me leaving high school or Howard Jarvis killing the funding of high school, but high school debate, went down. I mean, you can easily graph, the fall of debate to Proposition 13. It's an easy relationship.
Through your high school, you say you were very involved, and in college you were very competitive. Let's brag a little bit. What were some of your own personal successes?
Well, I qualified for nationals as a senior in debate. Orange County was a very tough district, and the competition was always fierce.
Was that back when you only got one qualifier?
Yes, one qualifier, or you could win state and qualify.
Well, yeah, right.
For one qualifier. We had a debater in Orange County named David Skolansky.
I remember David.
And I still believe that he was one of the 2 or 3 best debaters I ever saw, and still to this day is one of the 2 or 3 smartest people I've ever met. And he was a year older than I was, fortunately. He didn't block me off my entire career, but He was pretty much in the way the rest of the time. And so, we could only get as far as, finishing behind David most of the time. And his partners, John Tweed, Ron Dorn, were a couple of them. I had a pretty successful, let's put it this way, it just happened because we were a relatively small team. I was on the top debate team for 3 years. And we were pretty competitive. I had some really good partners. I was debating the UM rounds at the Redlands tournament as a sophomore, and again as a senior. I guess the biggest thing invitational-wise, I got to the final round of Berkeley my senior year in both policy debate and extemp. And we actually had to pull out of extemp.
Because the debate rounds were...
Caforio tells this story to this day. We actually had to pull out of extemp because we were prepping for the debate round.
Mm-hmm. Oh, prepping?
Yes, and the Berkeley folks were quite shocked that we would do that. But I was probably going to be sixth in the finals anyway, and so we needed that hour to get ready for Beverly Hills, and so we took it. And I guess those are unlike I said before. Nobody really, you didn't have to go out of state to be competitive, but some people did. And so there were definitely people with a better national reputation than I had that year. Sandra Sebel-Jones was in my class.
Yes, I know.
Scott Moore from Lowell High School was in my class. Those were two of them. And and then there, of course, there were a lot of great California debaters too. But in terms of, just kind of national reputation, we really didn't have much of one. We were eliminated we were eliminated at state by Claudia Burke.
Oh, I remember Claudia. She was from my league.
Yeah, by Stockton Lincoln, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And also an excellent extemper. High school was a lot of fun, and Caforio was a fantastic coach, super to travel with. He had a VW van. And usually we take maybe 2 or 3 teams to a tournament, say like Berkeley. We always traveled on those long trips with his wife Judy, who was also hilarious. We played a lot of Jeopardy in the car on the way to these things, and we had the Berkeley trip. We also had USF. We had the state tournament USF in 76. And then we had the Fresno State Tournament in '78. So we had some of those just really memorable, fun car trips. And then at Redlands, the big distinction, I guess, my last year debate, we were a first round at large team to the NDT, so we were ranked 12th in the country before the NDT, and I was 10th speaker at the NDT. So
that speaks for itself. All right, let's get you into the teaching career. Where did it begin, and did it start out with speech?
Well, I was an assistant the entire time I was in college. My freshman year, actually, my parents moved to New Jersey after my senior year, and they really wanted me to go to college with the family, close to the family. So I went to Rutgers for a year, and I was...
That's how you got to Rutgers.
Yes. And
I saw that in your record, but it's a family move.
Right, and it was miserable. I hated it. But, it's amazing. I kind of have this philosophy that things, have their way of working out, and things happen for a reason. And as miserable as I was in New Jersey that year, there are a couple things that happened where you definitely kind of makes you think things happen for a reason. Number one is I ended up coaching this team from Marlborough, New Jersey. And they probably were about the second best team on the East Coast that year. And I just lucked into them. They were kids basically my age. I mean, we were 3 18-year-olds basically driving around in my Mazda, my 1974 Mazda, going to tournaments all over the East Coast. And they were very good, and and I could help them at least somewhat. And so I kind of started getting coaching there, but I also was known in the Eastern policy debate family because I had this really good team. They didn't know who I was before then, but those kids kind of put me on the map. And as happens to all of us, I guess, really. But then the other thing that happened that year, well, because I was in the East Coast, was I met Ted Belch.
Okay.
You know, who in a lot of senses was my mentor and, you know, still is my very, very good friend. And I'm sure I would have eventually bumped into Ted over the years, but it just so happened that our teams that year, my New Jersey kids and his team from New York, were already very good friends. So the kids kind of brought us together. And we, you know, our friendship started that much earlier, and you know, who knows what would have happened, you know, if fate had, you know, had left it for me to meet him. So that turned out to be very fortunate, because Ted certainly had a great influence on my career. So then I came back out to Redlands my sophomore year, and here was the third thing that happened as a result in New Jersey. Probably October, I'm sitting in the debate office, and our debate coach, Bill Southworth, comes in and says, well, the guy from UKIPA just called. He's starting a debate team. He wants one of our kids to come out and help. And I was the only one sitting in the debate office. And so he said to me, well, you've done this before, so why don't you go do it? And we probably had 6 or 8 kids on the team, any one of whom Southworth could have picked to send out to help out at UKIPA. But, you know, in part at least, I don't know if it was totally random.
Was that Tom Roper?
It was Tom Roper, yes.
Okay.
But in part because, you know, I had done it before in New Jersey, I got sent out to be the assistant at UKIPA. And as a result of that, got to meet Tom Roper, worked with him for 3 years. You know, really a father figure to me in my life, certainly a mentor. You know, I just learned an incredible amount from Tom. You know, so that was, you know, that was a fantastic experience too. So that was college, and then over those couple years I was at UKIPA, I got to know the coach at Damien, Bob Macharnik, and Bob had decided by the end of my junior year in college that he was going to go to med school. And so my senior year in college, he spent a good bit of the beginning of it trying to recruit me to take his place. And then after I blew my first interview with Damien, he spent most of the rest of the year trying to convince the principal to hire me. And he finally was successful on both counts. And so he decamped off to med school, and I went to Damien in 1982. And
so that Damien was really your first teaching job,
yep.
And
Yep.
so you all the way, okay.
Yes.
Okay, in all of those years since '82, I believe you said, I'm going to ask you to narrow it down, because I know you've had so many student successes. What would stand out to you as a few of them along the way that were really, really biggies in your life?
Well, it's funny. We just had a reception the other day for some graduates, some friends of the program, you know, because we, you know, just won nationals.
Right.
And so an alumni parent put together this reception, and we invited a bunch of people, and you really didn't know for sure who was going to show up to it. And it was great to see everybody. But one of the graduates who approached me was from the class of 2000. And he was not he was on the top team his senior year. He went to nationals. He traveled for us that year. But frankly, his freshman and sophomore year, he was a bit of I don't know what you'd call him. I mean, I wouldn't ever say he was a gangster kind of kid, but he certainly had an affection to really want to try to look like he fit in with a whole different group than debaters. Let's put it that way. And he really just but he also showed an interest in debate. He kept fighting. He kept doing it. And finally, he rose. He was a bright kid, and he finally got to our top team and did very well. And he was one of the people who came to the reception and really had some very nice things to say about the effect that debate had on his life. He's just graduated law school. He's clerking for a judge out in Fresno, a federal judge in Fresno. And that one really struck me as, we have so many bright kids who go to Damien, and frankly, they're going to be fine. and they really probably don't need me or debate or anything to really get them to where they're going. I mean, I realize I just blew our whole PR campaign by saying that, but you know, seeing a kid like that really does kind of bring home how much you know, difference the activity really can make for somebody, and so that was really nice. And then of course, you know, there's some of the kids I keep up with. You know, I had really kind of a run from 1988 to 1998, where we had about 4 or 5 teams that were just, you know, right there among the top teams in the country, and you know, we're kind of back in that cycle now, which is nice. But and so, you know, you certainly think of kids like that when,
right,
you know, those. But
well, in traveling with all these kids over all these years, having all these successes, can you think of a state tournament or two or a national tournament or two with an incident or that might be there?
Oh, can I? Of course, anybody who was at the 1980 state tournament in San Jose,
everybody mentions
I'm
that
sure
one.
has their own memories, has their own memories of that. But the funny thing about that one for me was I had a whole story completely outside the state tournament. I mean, completely outside the events of the actual tournament. Yes, I was in a round that got stopped, quarterfinal round of 9 teams that got stopped and, you know, repaired and, you know, all that. I mean, I was a judge in one of those rounds. Yes, I judged the final round that happened after the awards ceremony because things were running so late. So yes, I was involved in all that stuff. But I was still working for Roper, and there was some kind of a question about whether I could drive, and I guess it really turned out, I don't think I ever did drive a school vehicle when I worked for UKIPA. So when we traveled, I had to drive one of the Roper's private cars. And it just so happened that they had 2 of their own kids in the program. So they gave their permission for me to transport their kids in their car to whatever tournament we were going to. In this case, the state tournament. We also agreed to bring this kid from San Gorgonio with us who was in Congress. Just, we made some kind of trade with them for transportation, whatever it was. So we stopped for lunch on what would have been Thursday, I guess. We're just about to go over the Grapevine. We're in Burger King or something, and the kids are in front of me in line, and I hear the kid from San Gorgonio say to the UKIPA kids, "Oh my gosh, I forgot my insulin." So, okay, now I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do here. I try to ignore the kid. Oh no, I didn't hear that. I'm sure he just said something else. But eventually he tells me, okay, well, what do we do? Well, he says, well, I'm a military dependent. We can go to a military hospital, military base, whatever. I said, okay, well, where's the nearest one of those? He said, well, I think Vandenberg. Okay, stupid me, instead of turning around and going back to UKIPA, San Bernardino, wherever, which would have clearly been the better choice. Instead of getting on the Grapevine, we get on the 101 to go out to Vandenberg. We go to Lompoc or wherever the heck Vandenberg is. He gets his insulin, but now it's like 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I call Roper from a payphone. Oh, are you here in San Jose? Well, no, Tom, I'm actually still in Lompoc. So we proceed up the coast. We finally get to San Jose about midnight. Now I'm pulling off at every exit looking for a gas station, which I can't find. We're running low on gas. Of course, the inevitable happens. We run out of gas, as we're getting off the freeway to look for one of these stations. Now it's midnight. We don't have cell phones. This is 1980. Tom is staying at a hotel where the switchboard closes at midnight. And I've got his 2 kids with me in this car, and now their car's kind of driving past us slowly, checking us out. So I put his daughter in a cab. This was my smart move anyway. Put his daughter in the cab. She goes to the hotel. Eventually Mom comes back, pushes us over the top of the bridge that we had stopped at. Of course, right over the top of the bridge is a gas station, naturally, which we had never seen. So we get filled up. Okay, go to state. Tom's mad at me because the kids haven't slept, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Now we have the state tournament, disaster, that follows disaster. Now we're coming home on, I guess, Monday. So we're driving home Monday. Tom and I are racing down the 5, me and his green Maverick. Boom, light comes on the dashboard, radiator hose, and I'll spare you about 2 stops in this, but we stopped several times. We try to get it fixed. Finally, Tom literally takes the kids out of my car, gives me $50, waves goodbye, leaves me with his car on the road to, I'll never forget, Kettleman City. Says, please get my car home tomorrow, gives me $50 for a hotel. The kids sadly waving goodbye. They don't know if they're ever going to see me again. Next morning I get up, a couple of go-arounds with this, get to Wasco. They have to flush the radiator. Tom's wife has to come back up, give me more money because they didn't give me enough. And finally I got home after that. So
No wonder you remember that, not necessarily so fondly. Gee. Earlier you mentioned Ted Belch, and I wonder, along with Ted, who were some other coaches that were significant to you along the way?
Well, the ones I mentioned, Jim Caforio, obviously my coach, Ted as a colleague, Tom as a mentor and a colleague, without question, because Tom retired pretty early. Tom was out of my, kind of out of the area fairly early in my career, unfortunately. Without question, Martha Kennedy just is one of the class acts best people of all time. I mean, she's just such a wonderful person. When I was younger, I could be a bit of a hothead. Not that anybody's ever seen that in me, these days. But you would watch Martha, and it wouldn't really make any difference what disaster just happened. Martha was calm, cool, and I really, tried to, at least most of the time, model myself after her because she's just such a wonderful person, and such a great coach. Also, I mean, she did such a great job at Redlands when she was there. I'd say those were probably the main ones. There have been I've had a lot of great friends who were coaches. I think I've learned a little bit from a lot of different people. I used to watch you at the Long Beach tournament when you used to bring teams down. And you were always so successful, especially, you used to just dominate JV year after year after year. And I tried to take some things from that, because really, you've had such a fantastic career. And, even though we have some differences in philosophy, everybody wants to be successful, so you try to find the successful people and copy a little bit from them, certainly. So.
Oh, thank you. What do you feel, what you learned from others and all the kids that you've dealt with, if you could narrow it down a little bit to one or two of your finest contributions to speech education and competition?
Well, I guess I like to feel like I try to be a coach who is there for as many different types of kids as I can be there for. I'm certainly one who, when you're around the smart kids and the creative kids and all that, on a regular basis, it's easy, and I fall into this a lot all the time, where I develop close relationships with some of my best debaters over the years, and I still cherish those, and I still enjoy those times I spend coaching them and those successes. But I also try to look out for that kid who needs speech and debate, or needs debate in our case, in our program, as their niche to fit in, because it was certainly mine. If I hadn't had debate in high school, I probably would have been a student government kid or something like that, but I didn't have a lot of other options. I wasn't going to go off and join the basketball team, or be the best kid in the chorus or anything like that. And so I try the best I can to keep an eye out for those kids and not let them get lost in the shuffle, and keep a place for them in our program. We always, for a long time, we had an athlete who was kind of our token athlete on the team, but they were always good kids. They always represented us well. If they only go to one or two tournaments for us, I was perfectly happy to have that kid with us, because I just thought they'd help bring something to our team. So I don't know if that's really what
Yeah,
you're...
certainly. During these years again, things have changed. You're one of the younger Hall of Fame members, so you haven't seen as much change. But if you were around before LD, certainly. As you see these changes, what do you see as the good and the bad of the differences that we have today?
No question that the number of schools involved these days is a horrible trend. And there's a lot of things I think that you can point to for that. I will certainly grant that the way we conduct policy debate these days is certainly one of the things that has made it a hard sell in a lot of places. In an ideal world, you'd have expert coaches readily available, flowing out of college. I certainly think we have a problem when, the coach I think about, one of the coaches I always admired the most was Don Vattel. And Don Vattel was a man who really learned debate after he started teaching, as was Ted Belch, actually. And I don't know that Don Vattel, or that a Don Vattel, because he's so special he probably still could, but a Don Vattel type person would really be able to do that. I think they'd probably end up coaching mock trial. Because it's so much easier, you can still be bright and have a big effect on kids, but we've made it so hard. And we made it hard in a lot of different ways, not just because of the fast talk, but, you could be slow and still have the emphasis on evidence that we have. So I think that's an issue. Certainly the idea that we have to go on these, 3-day-long marathons to compete and to, have decent competition and be up all hours of day and night and exhaust ourselves and all of that. The debate I remember from when I participated in it was certainly a lot friendlier to, to mind and body, even though we were, certainly, we were certainly competitive, but it just wasn't as hard to do it. And, I know the quote, Bull Durham or one of those, it's the hard that makes it great or whatever, or I think it was Field of Dreams. But, we could make it easier on ourselves and the people who might teach it, and that might be a step for the better. And the other thing, let's see if I didn't lose my train of thought here. Certainly those things. Maybe I'll think of the other one.
That's fine. This was something I thought of that wasn't on the list that I warned you about, but do you think that your career would have been different if you'd been in a public school system as opposed to your parochial?
Absolutely. At least from all appearances. I honestly don't know if I would have stayed in California if I'd been started in the public schools. The great thing about Damien is, since it is a parochial school, in a lot of ways, I worked for the same administrator for 30 years, or for 28 years. He's been there. He's been the principal 30 years. And for whatever reason, he developed a faith in me, a trust in me, and he's pretty much let me alone. I turn in a budget request, and it usually gets approved. No fighting, no school boards to go to, and of course I've been, very appreciative, and they've been very generous and all of that. Obviously, there's some great public schools, and I've seen some great public school coaches, and some public schools who do a great job of what they have. I'm sure that if I had stayed in public schools, I would either be running an all-events program with a relatively small debate program, because I think if you have a certain amount of money and you're trying to serve the greatest number of kids, which I think is especially important in a public school, then you'd have to do that.
It's not going to be debate.
Right, you have to do that. Or I would have left the state and, taken a job at one of these, public schools in Illinois or Texas or whatever that seems to have virtually limitless resources and If I wanted to coach debate, I would have probably had to do that. So I'm sure my career would have been different if I had.
Where do you see it all going in California in the next few years and maybe the next few decades? What's up for forensics and speech education?
That's a great question. I remember what the thing was I was going to mention before about the trend. Is the expense, and this also plays into is the expense of doing this, and that's another bad trend. And travel costs, tournament costs, institute costs. I had students this summer this year for the first time, significant students in our program who were not able to attend an institute because of money. That's the first time that had happened in a long time. I think a lot of it depends on where the economy goes. I think that the level that debate is, at least right now in California and in other places, will probably mirror the economy. If the economy's good, the same schools that are strong in debate now will be able to stay strong in debate. And if the economy, continues to stay weak, then, everything could be up for question. The model that I grew up under, which was that you could basically go to a local tournament and at a relatively low cost and have good competition, we're either going to have to get back to that model somehow, or who knows what the future is.
And finally, in addition to what you've commented so far, is there anything that I haven't tried to drag out of you that you'd like to share with us? By the way, I would add at this point we're recording in September of 2009. And what's on your mind, if anything, of a philosophy or a pet peeve or some final thoughts?
I've been a member of the State Speech Council on and off now for, I guess, a good part of at least 15 years or so, and even back before then, early on in my career. There was a period of time kind of in the middle there where I wasn't very involved in CHSSA and in the State Speech Council. That was more from my own, philosophical issues, but I come around on them now.
We remember.
But, and I remember those early days when, particularly when you were running the tournament, when Don was running the tournament, I thought, that we developed mutual appreciations for, because the first thing that I kind of learned about you, other than competing, was what a great state tournament director you were, and the same thing with Donovan. And I think you guys kind of came to rely on me as being a pretty efficient part of the operation,
right.
So I guess, I haven't really talked about my involvement in CHSSA. And, I think that an organization like this does do some real good in just bringing people together. Because, if we were just kind of all off in our, competitive corners, and, there are a lot of other ways that you can develop appreciation and respect for people. And this is definitely one of those ways. I mean, Bob Jones and I probably had nothing in common philosophically, but I loved working for him when he was the debate pit boss. Just things like that. Larry Smith, same thing. Although he, he's an old debate guy, so I think, even though he's on a little different page, I always appreciate his sense of humor and how easy it was to work with him in those state tournaments and all that. And so I think, I've really enjoyed, as a real positive, my time in CHSSA as a way of getting to know people in a different light, and, really seeing people, for the professionals that they are, and, really be able to appreciate, everything they do kind of away from a competitive setting. So I really enjoyed that.
Well, I've really enjoyed hearing from you, and we thank you very much, Chuck Ballingall.
Thank you.